Manufactured Consent. Manufactured Consent by Joanne Reid. I want you guys to listen to this. Manufactured consent means it's not real. They manufacture that this is what people want. And the people who do it are the wealthy, and they use techniques that are sort of elaborated in the Powell memo. When I saw this piece yesterday by Joanne Reid, I said to myself, Joanne Reid has just joined the team, what I call the Ali Velshi team. Ali Velshi has been able to use the platform that would normally not allow them to say certain things in such a manner that they can do it without any severe repercussions. So I tell you what I want you to do is listen to Joanne Reid about manufactured consent, how the black church, black folks are being used in it with Trump to make it seem like if Trump wins, it wouldn't be something that the plutocracy enforced, but supposedly some change in American attitude. And who best to have this change in American attitude than black folks and other folks who normally would not vote for Donald Trump. Folks that make it impossible for Donald Trump to win. So I want you to listen to this, and then we'll take it on the other side. It is what she did in this work here was nothing short of impressive.
Manufacturing consent, a concept introduced by Edward S. Herman and Noam Chomsky in their 1988 book on the political economy of the mass media. Here's a clip from the 1992 documentary of the same name.
The state loses the bludgeon when you can't control people by force, and when the voice of the people can be heard, you have this problem. It may make people so curious and so arrogant that they don't have the humility to submit to a civil rule, and therefore you have to control what people think.
It is the job of the media, our job, to not just tell you what happened, but to give you some context around what happened in a way that informs you and helps you make decisions in your busy life. But too often, what the media actually does is create a mass consensus around the preferences of the financial and moneyed elite to subtly make their preferences your preferences. This is especially true in selling wars and sometimes elections. The wealthiest Americans have a clear preference for the outcome. Donald Trump reinstalled as president. Mother Jones recently reported the following in an article about America's top donors heavily favoring Trump and the Republicans, which reflects something we've long known about rich conservatives, their disdain for taxation. Mother Jones reports that Donald Trump may have lost in the Manhattan court, where a jury convicted him of all 34 felony charges of falsifying business records. But, quote, one place he and his party appear to be winning in the race to snag major cash from the richest families in America. For all of Trump's supposed grassroots appeal, as of May 1st, less than 1/3 of contributions to his campaign committee for the 2024 election cycle had come from grassroots donors. That means people giving less than $200. According to Open Secrets, large contributors accounted for 69% of Trump's $121 million total, whereas President Biden's campaign committee, which took in $195 million, got 54% from large donors. More broadly, the lion's share of confirmed contributions from the biggest political givers, the top 100 families, have flowed to Republican candidates and groups. Then there's something called hard money. This is the money contributed directly to a specific candidate, and these are donations that the federal government caps. In the hard money category, Mother Jones reports that Republicans took in 27% more from the top 100 families than Democrats did. In dollar terms, that's about $86 million for the Republicans versus about $68 million for the Democrats. But if you include soft money, the unlimited donations that the Supreme Court made possible through their Citizens United ruling during and maybe in response to President Obama getting elected by a 10 million vote margin, it's not even close. Quoting Mother Jones again, Republicans raked in a whopping $508 million from the top 100, triple the Democrats' $169 million take. It's a lot of numbers and data, but it may leave you wondering, Why would America's wealthiest families continue pouring money into a political party that has stripped itself of its dignity to fashion itself into a religious cult centered around a 78-year-old 37-count felon and adjudicated sexual abuser? Michael Mechanic of Mother Jones, who authored the piece that I'm quoting from, has a pretty good guess. Biden and the Dems have spooked America's richest with their multiple and largely unsuccessful efforts to close abusive loopholes and raise taxes on corporations and the upper crust. That includes efforts to tax the unrealized gains of the mega rich. The paper profits on appreciated investments that are currently only taxed when the assets are sold. In the meantime, Trump and the Republicans are fighting to extend their unpopular and ultimately disappointing 2017 tax cuts, a move the Congressional Budget Office calculates will cost the U.S. government $3.5 trillion with a T over 10 years. So what does that have to do with manufacturing consent? No one seems to know who originated the quote, but it's been repeated by everyone from James Baldwin, who said he was quoting Malcolm X, to Dr. King, that the most segregated hour in American life is 11 a.m. on a Sunday. It's just a factual legacy of this nation's history with race and religion that there are predominantly white churches and there are black churches. But what do you think of when you think of a black church? Probably something like this. Now, you may even think of images such as these. But what you probably don't think of is this.
What a nice welcome. Thank you.
That is the reaction to Donald Trump at what nearly every major media outlet reported was his visit to a black church in Detroit, Michigan, one of the 10 blackest cities in America, with a population that's about 78% African American and a poverty rate topping 33%. In other words, it would be hard not to fill a Detroit church with black people. So now I want you to look with your eyes. Just look with your eyes again at this crowd. Is what you're seeing here, what you would write in a headline, is a black church? And yet, here was the headline in the New York Times: Trump, in pitch to black voters in Detroit, cast Biden as anti-black. And the Washington Post: Trump portrays rampant crime in speech at black church in Detroit. In the Associated Press: Trump blasts immigrants for taking jobs as he courts voters at a black church MAGA event in Detroit. The Detroit Free Press even ran a photo series online with the headline: Trump visits Detroit church to woo black voters. What they somehow forgot to show was how overwhelmingly white that crowd was, and also how many empty seats there were in that sanctuary. In fact, if you looked at the carefully selected images in their online story, you would probably guess the crowd inside that sanctuary was overwhelmingly black and pro-Trump, literally cheering for him and chanting his name. And you would be forgiven for believing that this reinforces what seems to be the new hot narrative, that it is black people, specifically black men, who are driving Trump back into the White House with their overwhelming and historically growing support. And the actual reality that you can see with your own eyes and know, if you peel back the layers just a little bit, is that Trump spoke to an overwhelmingly white crowd inside a large Detroit church that, yes, does indeed have a black pastor, but which merely served as a venue. And that the people who participated in the roundtable, like those in the audience at that church, were already Trump supporters, not some new historic black supporters of Trump. Trump was in Detroit to participate in something called the People's Convention, a weekend-long gathering arranged by Turning Point Action, a conservative grassroots group founded by activist Charlie Kirk. It would have been easy enough to ask some of the attendees at that roundtable if they came to that church from the convention. And while several of these stories note that Trump harped on crime as part of his presentation, doesn't it seem kind of ironic and pretty relevant that the guy saying that just recently got convicted of 34 felony counts in New York? I mean, Trump raised the crime rate in Detroit just by being there. And one of his new friends at that event, Kwame Kilpatrick, Detroit's former mayor, is just 4 years out of prison himself, where he was sentenced to 28 years for his role in a wide-ranging racketeering conspiracy that included fraud, extortion, and tax crimes. Kilpatrick extorted city vendors, rigged bids, and took kickbacks and bribes. He used funds from nonprofit civic organizations to line his pockets and those of his family, steering millions of dollars to himself and his friends as Detroit plunged deeper into poverty. Kilpatrick was released because Trump commuted his sentence in 2020. So of course, now he's endorsed him. It's weird, right? How many of the black men endorsing Trump are formerly prominent and famous black men who have criminal records? Not like the criminal records this country has racked up for black men through things like the war on drugs. Nope. For crimes they committed after they were prominent and or rich. Kind of like Donald Trump. Also on hand as part of Trump's Blacks for Trump coalition, Black Republican Congressman John James, who represents an overwhelmingly white affluent district in Macomb and Sterling Heights, Michigan, meaning not that district, whose congresswoman is Rashida Tlaib. Also, Detroit native and former Trump HUD Secretary Dr. Ben Carson, who hasn't lived in Detroit since he was a child, and more recently has lived in mansions in places like Virginia and Florida. The ever-present Trump apologist Byron Donalds, whose majority white district is also in Florida, and a claque of local Detroit rappers who, apologies, I confess, I've never heard of. The church where Trump held this town hall is called 180 Church. The pastor, Lorenzo Sewell, is a Detroit native who grew up in an abusive home, with his father going to prison when he was a teenager. His experience with the criminal justice system did not happen when he was already rich and famous. He became a drug dealer and gang member as a troubled kid, the way it tragically happens for so many Americans in communities with high rates of poverty. But he had a conversion experience his senior year in high school in 1999, according to his church bio, and later became a pastor. Here he is, claiming Biden and Obama never visited the hood.
President Trump, I'm so humbled that you would be here. President Obama never came to the hood, so to speak, right? President Joe Biden, he went to the big NAACP dinner, but he never came to the hood. So thank you.
This is the part where I point out that President Obama came to Michigan 15 times as president, including Detroit. Pastor Sewell also claimed it's hard to find a black barber in Detroit for his Blasian kids, which honestly was weird. And in an interview on Fox after the roundtable, he quoted something you've probably never heard of called the Platinum Plan, a black wealth plan he claimed Donald Trump created, but which actually was the idea of rapper Ice Cube. So not a Trump plan at all. And I'll add this. It is ironic that Trump is attempting to court black voters in Detroit just 4 years after lying about black voters in Detroit and claiming their votes were inherently fraudulent. Michigan was one of the states whose votes Trump, Rudy Giuliani, and their little cabal tried to steal in their insurrection. The Attorney General in Michigan has charged 16 people with felonies for trying to steal the votes of black Michiganders from Detroit. So in making his pitch, I wonder if Donald reminded his new friends that he doesn't think their votes in a city where he won only about 5% of the votes should have counted the last time. Which brings me back to the question of manufacturing consent. We know based on the actual data, donations, the endorsements, and open statements of billionaires that it is the super rich and also Christian nationalists who want Trump back in power, not poor folks or black Americans. So why is all this energy being expended to try to pin a potential Trump return on these groups instead of on his real base? Because Trump has a big lie about black people too. And just like all of his lies, it aims to jeopardize democracy by making you think that he did more for black people than any president but Abraham Lincoln. We will unpack these lies.
Absolutely so. That was great. I mean, when I saw this piece from Joanne, I was like, oh my God, it's a long piece. How do I get it to about 10 minutes or so in such a manner, cut in and cut in spaces? So that was a long, hard job because it's much longer than this and it goes on further. But anyway, it's important. This piece shows great journalism. And the reason it shows great journalism is because it shows you something that is meant to be unseen, but that you act on. You act on something that's unseen. And what is unseen? Donald Trump making the push towards black men, poor people, etc., criminals. Notice this started way yonder when he pardoned many Democratic politicians that actually did some pretty bad things. Boyanovich from Illinois, when he did Kilpatrick, all these criminals. Notice he hangs around with a whole lot of criminals. He pardoned them for a reason. Okay, he thinks so little about black folks. He thinks that gives him cred, as if there is an equation between black and criminality. Now, but that is only the understory. The understory is then to get sufficient support, not necessarily majority support, but sufficient support from these folks that make it seem like his elevation to the presidency wasn't caused by the ones who really are the ones pushing his presidency. Look, many billionaires, Democratic and Republican alike, are supporting Donald Trump. We had one of the guy from I don't remember the group, Citigroup or one of these guys, Democrat. It's probably not Citigroup. It's one of the investment banking firms. Went ahead and said, maybe Trump isn't all that bad after all. But what they were saying is they don't like what a second Biden administration would look like, because he will be coming for something like, let me see again. Oh my God, he may actually come for the wealth tax, where we really tax wealth. You see, you average American citizens, your wealth is being taxed. Every time your house, you don't sell your house and then pay your tax on your house. You pay a wealth tax on your house every single year. But the stockholder, they don't. They only pay a tax on their wealth, which your home is your stock. Their stock, they only pay taxes on that. Oh, again, when they sell it. And by the way, they pay less taxes than you, because they pay an appreciation tax that is taxes less than the going tax base for the average American worker. So manufacturing consent is actually, and our Michael Rudden gets it right, it requires the complicity of the media. That's why it is great to see people like Joy-Ann Reid, Ali Velshi, and others who go around the natural direction that our corporate media has, and they find a way to put the message out and still stay on air. And there's going to be, after she did that piece, I can guarantee you that many up there, many in the plutocracy, called up MSNBC and said, you better put some tabs on that girl. Again, I am speculating, but I know how these things work. And just like I know they do that when Ali Velshi puts out certain stories and others put out certain stories. But we got to thank those who use the platform at the time that they have that platform to inform Americans of the fraud that is occurring with the media. So there's that.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead. Number 1, subscribe to our channel. And number 2, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.